Hello and welcome to 2022 Firearms and Qualification. Our training objectives for this block of instruction are identifying and writing the provisions of North Carolina General Statute 15A 401D2, the use of deadly force, as well as any departmental policy relating to the reasonable use of force to include possible de-escalation techniques. Identify and writing the provisions of North Carolina General Statute 14-269 and Article 54 as they apply to concealed carry by sworn law enforcement personnel, and describe and apply firearms safety with 100% proficiency on and off duty, on the range, and in the home. Describe in your own words and demonstrate basic marksmanship fundamentals to include grip, stance, sight alignment, sight picture, and the draw, and demonstrate the ability to attain a minimum qualification score of 70% or higher if your agency standards exceed state minimums on any approved course of fire for both day and night, and also demonstrate the ability to pass a day and night decision-making course of fire. The officers have had 3 attempts within a given day per course of fire. In reviewing Durham County's use of force policy in General Order 3.02, remember, force should only be used only when other means of resolving the situation are exhausted or are not feasible. Deputies shall only use the amount of force which is objectively reasonable to effectively bring an incident under control while protecting the safety of others and themselves. The amount and degree of force will be dependent on the totality of all facts and circumstances known to the deputy at the time or reasonably perceived by the deputy for a use of force decision. Remember, all DCSO employees and reserve deputies have the duty to intervene within their scope of authority and training to prevent or stop the excessive or unreasonable use of force by another law enforcement officer or other public safety associate when it is safe and reasonable to do so. All DSO employees and reserve deputies who observe any violations of general orders, federal law, state law, or local ordinance will report the violation verbally and in writing through the chain of command. Remember, when using force, deputies should always try to resolve a situation with the least amount of force necessary. Force decisions may escalate and de-escalate rapidly in relation to the perceived threat. A deputy's goal is to achieve compliance, but in doing so, they do not have to exhaust other lower levels of force options before moving to another if it can be justified. Some of our force options are officer presence. Here we can use verbal direction and de-escalation. We have use of force techniques such as physical control and soft hand techniques. Remember, chokeholds are strictly prohibited as physical control technique. We have less lethal force options. Our OC spray, our electronic control devices, otherwise known as tasers. We have physical control, hard hand control techniques. We have our impact weapons, flashlights, batons, and of course our instruments of deadly force. Remember, our legal authority for the use of force comes from North Carolina General Statute 15A 401D. Defines the legal authority for the use of force in North Carolina. The language of statute is as follows: use of force or arrest. Subject to the provisions of subset division 2, a law enforcement officer is justified in using force upon another person when and to the extent that he reasonably believes it's necessary. To prevent the escape from custody or to effect an arrest of a person who he reasonably believes has committed a criminal offense unless he knows that arrest is unauthorized, or to defend himself or a third person from what he reasonably believes to be the use of imminent use of physical force while effecting or attempting to effect an arrest, or while preventing or attempting to prevent an escape. A law enforcement officer is justified in using deadly force upon another person for a purpose specified in subdivision 1 of this subsection only when it appears to be reasonably necessary, thereby to defend himself or a third person from what he reasonably believes to be the use or the imminent use of deadly physical force, to effect an arrest or prevent the escape from custody of a person who he reasonably believes is attempting to escape by means of a deadly weapon, or who by his conduct or other means indicates that he presents an immediate threat of death or serious physical injury to others unless apprehended without delay, or to prevent the escape of a person from custody imposed upon him as a result of conviction or a felony. The statute of 14A 41D2 gives officers the authority to use deadly force in some situations. Is this something the officers really want to do? Can I shoot does not always translate into should I shoot. In the book One Killing, the Psychological Cost of Learning to Kill in War and Society, Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman states, there is within most men an intense resistance to killing their fellow man. While officers may have a right to use deadly force, they do not want to use deadly force. Human life is a precious commodity. When General MacArthur spoke of soldier's role, he said, the soldier, above all other people, prays for peace, for they must suffer and bear deepest wounds and scars of war. Law enforcement officers bear the same role as peacekeepers. Daily, they must deal with the traumas inherent to doing the job, dealing with both the good and bad of humanity. In case law relating to use of force, we've all studied or know of Tennessee v. Garner and Graham v. Conner. Just a quick overview. Remember, Tennessee v. Garner, the U.S. Supreme Court reinforced against the using of deadly force to arrest fleeing felons in the absence of a deadly threat. And in Graham v. Conner, remember, they talked about the use of force must be reasonably necessary to accomplish the function. Examples: making arrests, executing a search warrant, etc. In determining the objective reasonableness of an officer's action, the court will examine the following: the type of crime for which the stop or arrest is being made, whether the suspect is an immediate threat to the safety of others, whether the suspect is actively resisting, and whether the suspect is attempting to evade arrest or detention by flight. And to review, remember, carrying a firearm out of jurisdiction. North Carolina General Statute 14269 allows an officer to carry a concealed firearm off duty without a carry concealed permit, as long as the officer is not consuming alcohol, is not consuming any unlawful controlled substance, does not have alcohol or any unlawful controlled substance in the body, and not on federal property. Officers carrying off duty under this authority who encounter posted private property may be not in violation of North Carolina carry concealed statutes. Should an officer want to carry a weapon other than their service weapon off duty under this authority without a concealed handgun permit or out of jurisdiction, the officer must qualify with any weapon they carry if it's not their duty weapon. So again, you must qualify with it as you would your duty weapon. Officers should be aware that if they leave their jurisdiction and are not in the course of performing their official duties, they only have the rights of a private citizen in terms of the use of deadly force. If the officer no longer has powers of arrest, the officer can only detain for any felony, breach of peace, crime involving physical injury to another person, or crime involving theft or destruction of property they witness until the officer with the jurisdiction arrives to take custody. Deadly force is not authorized for a citizen's detainment. Private citizens have the right to defend themselves or a third party from the imminent threat of deadly or death or great bodily harm, as long as the person using defensive force did not instigate the situation and excessive force was not used. In reviewing traveling out of state, the Law Enforcement Safety Act 2004, H.R. 218, this act allows for concealed carry firearms for qualified, active, and retired separate law enforcement officers under specific rules nationwide. Again, remember, you must have a photo identification issued by the agency and proof of qualification. And states, local governments, and private parties can prohibit concealed carry firearms by law enforcement officers in certain areas or on specific property. Please take a moment to review the following slide if you wish to fly armed. And as we cover every year, remember the 4 cardinal rules of gun safety handling. Treat all weapons as loaded until you have personally inspected them. Point the muzzle in a safe direction at all times. Keep your finger outside the trigger guard and on the frame until you are on target, have a legal right to shoot, and then have decided to shoot. And be sure of your target and what is around and beyond it. More firearms safety in general. Again, stuff we've covered every year, but always a good reminder. Officers should always treat every weapon as if it's loaded. Again, never point a loaded weapon at anyone unless there is intention to shoot. Always keep the weapon pointed in a safe direction. Only routine cleaning and maintenance should be performed. We have several armors that are certified with the Glock. If there's an issue, that can be inspected to more of a degree. Only routine cleaning and maintenance should be performed by most officers. Never use a weapon as a club or hammer. Don't throw it around. Never hand a loaded weapon to anyone. Unload it first. If someone hands you a weapon that states it's unloaded, you always want to inspect it. Never carry a weapon in a pants pocket, waistband without a holster. A handgun should remain in an officer's holster unless there is a need to use it. Do not be lulled into overconfidence. And when you're using the restroom, make sure you secure your weapon and take it with you when you're done. More firearms safety and safety at home. Remember, warning shots are prohibited by this agency. Safety at home. Always make sure you secure your firearm from children. Do not assume a child cannot fire a weapon. They may not know the difference between a toy and a real thing. Consider the use of trigger locks. Those can be commercially bought and also be given. The agency has many that can be passed out if needed. And be familiar with North Carolina General Statute 14-315, storage of firearms to protect minors. Please take a moment to review symptoms of lead poisoning. The next few slides deal with basic marksmanship fundamentals. Please take a moment to review. In continuing reviewing, remember the 4 steps to drawing the handgun. This is something that's taught from day one, but it's always good to remind people that first thing you want to do is establish your grip, clear the holster, center the weapon on the body, and extend to the target. Remember the cycle of operation of the semi-automatic handgun. The first thing we have is feeding, then chambering, then locking, firing, unlocking, extracting, ejecting, and cocking. Remember, when dealing with malfunctions, even though they're rare with the Glock firearm, they can't happen. First thing you want to attempt to do is tap the magazine, make sure it's seated properly, rack the slide, make sure the round is chambered and not ready to fire. If this fails to work, check for a double feed. If this occurs, perform a lock, drop, rack, insert, rack, ready, and lock. When you're locking the slide to the rear, you're dropping the magazine, you're racking the slide to clear the chamber, you insert a new magazine, rack the slide to chamber the round, and now you're ready to fire. And to review for qualification, remember, officers are required to qualify with any handgun they carry, and it must occur on both day and night courses, and you must complete a day and night combat course that has to do with some type of decision making. And if you carry any of the weapon, shotgun, rifle, you're also required to qualify with that weapon as well. Please take a moment to review the training objectives. And as always, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to the training division